Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. Glad you could join me. Make sure you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share the episode with your family and friends because I have a great guest coming on today. I have Joe Concha, author of a brand new book, Progressively Worse, Why Today's Democrats Ain't Your Daddy's Donkeys. And I'll just start off with the obvious. Are you telling me that this is no longer the JFK Democrat Party?
Not even JFK. I'll look at Bill Clinton, for example, which is in our lifetimes. And as I share in the book, 1996, I voted for the guy because we had peace, we had prosperity, and I saw a president who was willing to work with the other side. In that case, it was Newt Gingrich, Republicans in the House of Representatives. And the things he passed were things like, I don't know, welfare reform. Yep, I'm for that. Balanced budget amendment. Well, what do you mean? Don't spend what you don't have? We had budget surpluses in the 90s. And when people think of Bill Clinton, they automatically go to Monica. And it was the worst unforced error in the history of any presidency, I think. But when you look at the record, the guy was a centrist in essence, right? Maybe socially liberal on certain things, right? But for the most part, that's the way I'd like to see our government work. And just now, when you think of, to your point, JFK, he cut taxes during a recession, and then they got to like something like 7% GDP. He was for a strong military. The guy stared down Khrushchev, and he was against racial quotas and believed in a merit-based system instead. So you're like, yeah, I could support that too. Jimmy Carter, bad president, sure, but he was a pro-life Democrat in the Oval Office, and that is unthinkable now. I think there's only one member of Congress on the Democratic side who's pro-life at this point. The rest of them are pro-choice. And even Barack Obama, if you want to go back a couple of years ago, he was called the deporter-in-chief. That was by the left. They weren't very happy with the fact that his DHS secretary, Jay Johnson, a very capable guy who I've met, actually did his job, and relatively the border was somewhat secure compared to now anyway, where hundreds of terrorists are coming across under this administration. And even Joe Biden, the other version of Joe Biden, 2008 used to brag about how he was for hundreds of miles of border fence because we had to protect this country and protect our jobs. And obviously that person's gone in more ways than one. So yeah, these ain't your daddy's donkeys anymore. And we know that because Kamala Harris and Tim Walz is your Democratic ticket, which is somehow to the left of Bernie Sanders. And I didn't think that was possible.
Yeah, I didn't think it was either, but apparently they found a way. They figured it out. And you know, people like to say that JFK and Clinton would be Republicans today. I'm like, no, they'd be declared right-wing radical extremists, not even Republicans. They'd go to the far right. I mean, it's astonishing how we've come so far so quickly. What do you make for the Democrat shift?
You know, I've been asked this when we're talking about the book, like why and how? Like, how has this happened? And I keep going back to the media itself. And I remember 2019, that was during the last presidential cycle, and there were something like 24 Democrats running for that nomination. So CNN turns around and they say, we'll have each of you on our network for 1 hour to do a town hall on your own with one of our hosts or anchors. And all of them accepted, of course, because that's an hour of national airtime and you got to stand out some way. But then they're like, but there's one little catch. You could only talk about one topic. It's the theme of the town hall, and we're going to call it the climate crisis. So if you're like the mayor of, the governor of Montana, and you're somewhat of a centrist, relatively anyway, then you want to talk about energy, you want to talk about trade, you want to talk about the economy, you want to talk about the border, you want to talk about foreign policy. Nope, not allowed. Because CNN says if you want to get on our air, you're going to talk about something called the climate crisis and how you want to spend trillions of dollars in order to combat this so-called crisis. So I found that as like one glaring example of the media pushing this party to the left. We saw it with MSNBC just a couple of months ago. They hired Ronna McDaniel, milquetoast, kind of, your average pundit, I guess, used to run the RNC. And she was brought on there to give an actual pro-Trump or at least pro-conservative viewpoint here and there. And you saw what happened, right? She did one interview. Then the inmates completely turned on management, openly called them out on the air, said they should apologize for hiring this woman because we can't have any Trump supporters on our network. And she was gone in 48 hours. So when you see these kinds of examples, or even with the Trump town hall on CNN last year, where their network president was ousted literally because they had the audacity to put the GOP frontrunner at the time on its air for a town hall, and he actually did well, and they didn't like that very much. In fact, Anderson Cooper, he went on the air the next night. I don't know if you remember this.
He apologized.
And he said, I know that was very disturbing what you saw last night, but I don't blame you if you never watch this network again. I'm sorry. If I'm running that network, you're gone. You can't say that on our air. Who are you? So, yeah, I think it's that. And I think social media as well. You see who's popular on there. AOC, Swalwell, Adam Schiff. They're there for likes and retweets. They're not there to actually work with the other side, like Newt Gingrich did, for example, with Bill Clinton, or like Tip O'Neill did with Ronald Reagan, where they would have a drink after work. If they had any differences, they worked it out, and they were civil towards each other, even in public. We don't see that anymore. It's all about owning the other side, snark. You saw it during that rally with Tim Walz and Kamala Harris last night, lying about J.D. Vance, lying about Trump, just going for like those gotcha lines that the media loves so much. So I think those things have pushed the party in this direction. It is social media and it is traditional media, making sure that this party is now the party of MSNBC.
Can we even call it traditional media anymore? Because it seems like it's more state-sponsored media. And I want to talk to you about that when we get back. So everyone, hang tight. We'll be right back. Are you prepared for the unexpected? As a former emergency manager, being prepared is not a choice, it's a necessity, and that's where the wellness company comes in. Imagine having the peace of mind that you're equipped to handle any medical crisis, from tick bites to the latest pandemic. The wellness company's medical emergency kit is your lifeline, packed with essential medications like ivermectin, emergency antibiotics, antivirals, and more. This kit is your ultimate preparedness solution. The wellness company's team of renowned medical professionals, including Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. James Thorpe, Dr. Harvey Risch, Dr. Drew Pinsky, and more. They are truth-seeking doctors, and they have designed a kit that sets the gold standard for safety and prevention. Don't wait for the next crisis to strike. Visit twc.health/PAS and use promo code PAS for an exclusive 10% discount just for being a listener of this show. Prepare today, rest easy tomorrow. Use code PAS at checkout. Welcome back, everyone. So, Joe, we see that the Kamala Harris-Tim Walz ticket, that they're embarking on this campaign, the Democrats' campaign, to label the other side weird. It's a very bizarre campaign strategy, if you ask me, but what I've noticed is how the media has taken up the talking points and they run with it. It seems that there's a lot of coordination between the Kamala Harris campaign, that the talking points they're distributing, and what the media is distributing. Everything is literally word for word. You can't distinguish between what the campaign's putting out there and what the media's putting out there. And it's not like they're really challenging her at all. And they're not pressuring her to answer any questions. So we have to ask, what happened in the media? They're not journalists. They're not even commentators. They're activists.
Yeah, they're hacktivists, right? And I think it's two things. I think the education system, journalism schools across the country have basically preached this, right? That you're not there to speak truth to power anymore. Well, you are, but you're only speaking truth to power, or what your version of the truth, to Republicans. And you're here to support Democrats and make sure that they could get over the finish line. Like, so they're indoctrinated that way. But then also, you know, and you mentioned this before, by the way, it's incredible with Kamala Harris. She hasn't taken one question now in 18 days since basically becoming the Democratic nominee. And no one seems to have a problem with this. And she's also a candidate that, by the way, in 2020 didn't receive one vote as a presidential candidate, and now in 2024 as a nominee, didn't receive one vote. So no votes and no questions. That's where we're at this point. But I think with the media, as far as why they act the way they do, I think it's two things. It is that they are mostly to the left anyway, because think about where the centers are as far as political media are concerned. It's Washington. I think Trump got something like, 4 or 5% of the vote there, and New York City, where he got something like, 9% of the vote. So it's the ecosystem that even if you were in the middle or even a little bit to the right, you got to conform, or else you're not going to get hired. Because think about it, right? I remember Dasha Burns. I don't know if you remember this. This is 2022, October, a couple days before the midterms. And she interviewed John Fetterman when Fetterman wasn't the Fetterman we see now, but he couldn't process basic conversation. He had to use closed captioning. He just didn't seem right at all. Whenever he spoke, it was completely and totally out of whack because his brain wasn't quite functioning yet after suffering that massive stroke. And she comes back and she reports straight up that Fetterman had trouble with the conversation, making small talk, didn't seem to be able to follow what she was saying sometimes. And there were people in this industry like Kara Swisher, all these people that we listen to, Maggie Haberman. Oh, no. Dasha Burns has to go. She should be fired. How dare she How dare she do this to John Fetterman? So that put her in line. So I think the only way you get your next contract in this business is to go along with the narrative. We see it with Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, right? I mean, they interviewed Trump 41 times in 2015 and 2016, mostly by phone, which is supposed to be like a big no-no. But they allowed it. And if you go back and listen to those interviews, they completely kissed his butt. And then the audience turned on them. And then now they're the most anti-Trump people ever. So it's all phony, by the way, like a lot of this performance art that we see on the air from the Jake Chappers of the world and so on.
You mean to tell me that Joe Scarborough was lying when he said best Biden ever?
Oh, wasn't that great? This is the best Biden has been. He's better than any GOP speaker I've met in 30 years. I talk to him every day. Yeah, you talk to him every day.
And F you if you don't like it.
I remember that FU and these are all cheap fakes and it's edited. No, he really didn't fall going up those stairs or on a stage, or he didn't shake hands with the air, or he never really said that his uncle was eaten by cannibals, or fact check, maybe he was eaten by cannibals. That's what I'm talking about. Like people like Scarborough and like down the line, they just want their next contract. And the only way you do that is to support the Democratic Party and not speak out in any way, shape, or form against them. And that's why you're seeing this all in lockstep now that Kamala Harris isn't the borders are, and Tim Walz is actually a moderate. When we could talk about the policies, but that's the argument that they're making it. And enough people will buy it because that's their only source of news, New York Times, CNN, MSNBC.
Well, that concerns me. I mean, if you just look at the conspiracy covering up Joe Biden's cognitive decline, like you brought up Joe Biden shaking hands with a ghost, that should have been the first indicator to everyone like, whoa, something serious is going on. But most of the people watching MSNBC, CNN, they never saw things like that. And their heads were buried in the sand. Then it's revealed that, yeah, he can't do the presidency. It's very clear to anyone that's been paying attention. And you had the media basically assist the White House in covering up the cognitive decline for 4 years. With Kamala Harris, they only have to hide her for about 80 days, right? Because obviously she's not going to do interviews during the convention next week. So she's got the next 2 weeks where we know she's not sitting down. She's going to be on script, teleprompter. A lot of Republicans say you can't hide her forever, but the truth is it's not that difficult to hide her for 80 days, and they will do that, will they?
Yeah, Dom, it's the Chat GPT candidacy, right? You could just program her, just throw it in a teleprompter, but put together a speech with all these like platitudes and generalities, and not anything specific towards policy. And you're right, they can hide her. She won't do it. You'll find Liz Cheney at Mar-a-Lago poolside before you ever see Kamala Harris or Tim Walz hold a press conference. She's never held a press conference, not in 2019 when she ran for president, not once as vice president. And you say, vice presidents don't hold press conferences. I'm pretty sure I remember Mike Pence did. So that excuse is out. And then as a candidate, not one question, forget press conference, not one question from anybody outside of RuPaul's drag queens. And you're right, it's 90 days, maybe a little less than that, but that's not a long time. And they buy another 2 weeks because of the convention. You're right about that. And then from there, after that, then we get the end of summer. So she could say she's taking a little break after the convention. Then it's Labor Day. Then before you know it, it's the NFL season and other people are distracted by other things. And yeah, maybe that gets her over the finish line. And that's a shame too, because you literally have somebody who wants to abolish ICE, wants to abolish fracking, wants to abolish fossil fuels, opposes border wall construction, opposes remain in Mexico, supports sanctuary cities, says that your kid, like my daughter who's 10, she could get a sex change and your parent doesn't have to know about it, like actually supports something like that, supports biological men playing against biological women. We saw how that's going over at the Olympics right now. And wants to raise taxes, which usually that's a losing proposition for anybody running for president. Obviously, soft on crime, wanted to defund the police. I could go down the line, Dom, but there are so many questions that she needs to answer. And there aren't enough people in media outside of you, outside of me, my colleagues on Fox, and a couple other places calling for her to answer questions. Because, again, it's about winning and defeating Trump, not about accountability and the truth.
Well, sadly, the truth has been murdered, and I want to talk to you about that when we get back from this quick break. So everyone hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So before the break, Joe and I were talking about how the truth has been murdered. Also, this idea of democracy has actually been murdered, right? Because we see the media and the Democrat Party constantly bring up this amorphous threat to democracy. That democracy is ending here in the United States, and we're a republic, not a democracy. But in any event, they talk about democracy, and they don't see the irony in pushing the person that won the Democrat nomination, that won the primary, pushing him out the door, and then anointing Kamala Harris, who didn't receive one single primary vote, anointing her to be the Democrat nominee, without any regard for what ordinary Democrats out there think. So when they say threats to democracy, well, you kind of murdered democracy when you anointed Kamala Harris and the media just coronated her to the top. How do you see it?
It's like the Soviet Union. I swear, we have an installed candidate. It's just remarkable that this is happening. And the only regret I think Trump may have now was when he was goaded into doing that debate with Joe Biden in late June. He probably could have said, and no one would have had a problem with this, like, hey, why don't we get nominated first at our respective conventions, and then when people are back from summer, I'll debate you in early September. But then I wonder if I go through that scenario and then Biden performs the same way that he does, I guess he still could have stepped aside anyway, despite being the nominee, right? Maybe just step down from the presidency altogether, which he should do. I mean, you see his schedule today, nothing on it again. The world's on fire. The economy obviously is very shaky right now. And he gets the daily brief at 10 a.m. because I guess terrorists sleep in too. And then that's it. There's nothing else on the schedule. And Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, I guess their handlers are smart enough not to put Biden on the campaign trail with them because he's toxic at this point. But yeah, that's the amazing thing. We're going to save democracy by destroying it. And that means no votes and no questions. And here's your candidate. And it's packaged enough where enough people will like her. I still think Trump wins, quite frankly, because I think the conditions on the ground haven't changed, Dom. I think inflation's still way too high for people's tastes. Cost of living still up 20% since Biden took office and Harris. And we obviously have a border that has allowed hundreds of terrorists to come in here, a national security nightmare. And what's going on over in Israel, in Gaza, Ukraine, Russia, all these things. The world is not a better place under Biden-Harris than it was under Trump. And I think when people have that decision to make in the swing states and in the places that matter, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, I think those go towards Trump's way, regardless of how things look right now.
No, that's the thing that frightens me is the mindset of the American people, because I don't know where they are at this point. I mean, the reality is in any normal election cycle, the Republican candidate should be up 20 points, right? I mean, just given everything that's going on. And unfortunately, this is going to be a close race. No matter what happens, it's still going to be fairly close. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the American people have shifted so far to the left, and a lot of it can be attributed to the hostile takeover by the left of not just the media, academia, I still think the bureaucracy?
Dom, I think we're still a right of center country. I don't think we're far right. I don't think we're far left. And I don't even think we're center. I think we're slightly more to the right in terms of just common sense things, like people support more police on the street. They want laws to be enforced by district attorneys. They want a secure border. They don't like spending money that we don't have that causes inflation. If that's right of center, then I think that's where the country is at this point. So to answer your question around, is the American people, are they just completely like, wow, blown away by Kamala Harris? I don't think so. I think we're in the sugar high phase still, where they got rid of the old man, the Democrats did. And no matter who replaced him, there was going to be this kind of enthusiasm, because it's almost like a release, a relief of, wow, we can maybe win now, when under Biden, all of them would tell you privately that he had absolutely no chance and didn't have the stamina to even get to the finish line. So I think if there's a debate, and this is the whole key to the whole race, if we want to just bottle down to this, the problem now is that Trump wants to debate Harris on September 4th on Fox. And Harris is not going to agree to that, because she'll get actual real questions from Brett Baer and Martha McCallum.
But it does make sense, since early voting starts September 6th.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's when the debate should happen. No, all of it makes sense. Just like it doesn't make any sense for Trump to debate Harris on ABC anymore, because he agreed to that with Joe Biden. And if those are the rules, then no, that it's still on, you agreed to it, fine. Then I want to see on August 13th, I want to see on CBS Kamala Harris debate JD Vance, because she agreed to that, right? Hey, your rules, that's what you said. So my worry is that Harris will say the ABC debate is the only one you agreed to. You didn't show up. I'm not debating. And Trump will say only on Fox, or I'm not debating. I think Trump has to negotiate a bit. Don't go on ABC. He has pending litigation against George Stephanopoulos, and we see that they're now like MS-ABC at this point. So don't do that. But find somewhere in the middle, somewhere. It doesn't even have to be on a network. It could just be like, pick two like reporters who are actually objective, then simulcast the thing to all the networks and do the debate that way. But he has to debate her, because the media isn't going to call her out on all of her policy positions that I just mentioned. So the only way that comes out is when 90 million people, and that's usually the amount of people that watch presidential debates in the fall, 90 million people are watching. You have reporters asking germane questions about relevant policy. And then once you take Kamala Harris out of a teleprompter and take away the scripted remarks, it's the same thing as Biden. It's clean up on aisle 2, 5, 17, 24, and 28.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I look at is the narrative, and I know you focus and study narratives with the media and how it gets put out there.
Yeah.
Republicans most of the time are playing defensive. Now, we've gotten, I don't know, 40 years of news cycles stretched in a month and a half from the
Yeah.
Biden dropping and assassination attempt on Trump. But when we look at the narrative, Republicans haven't been able to break through the narrative. However, it's a lot of times their fault. I mean, one of the big things is what did Kamala Harris know about Joe Biden's condition? When did she know it? What did she do about it? She was in a lot of these meetings. And why haven't Republicans actually focused on that aspect? Because again, I think this is the largest conspiracy and cover up in U.S. history. I think the American people were bamboozled, and the American people have a right to know who's running this country.
Precisely right, particularly when it's such a crucial moment right now. I mean, Iran is on the precipice of attacking Israel. That could be a large scale Middle East war that could spread when Russia and China get involved, because that's, their oil, that's going to be impacted. And yeah, we deserve to know who's running the country. For a while, I thought it was the fake doctor being the fake president, and Dr. Jill Biden. Is it Susan Rice? Is it really Barack Obama behind the scenes? None of these people are elected, and that's a huge problem. So you're right. With 40 news cycles in the span of about a month and a half, you mentioned that the Trump assassination attempt, that's basically forgotten now, right? That entire breakdown, if you even want to call it that. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but something feels kind of intentional about this at this point, because I'm sorry, when that's your only job to protect the president, and the one building that has line of sight to the president isn't secured, and then when you know for an hour and a half that there's a threat out there and you still send the man out. I was at the Wildwood, New Jersey rally, and I got to tell you, my wife was like, "Are you sure that's safe?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Secret Service is everywhere. There, it is fine." After it, she goes, "How was it?" I go, "I don't think it was safe. I got to be honest with you. They had the amusement park open right behind him, and there was one ride that went up basically like not quite directly over the stage, but probably within like 50 yards. And I saw these people on it with their hands up and everything. I'm like, is anybody vetting these people before they go on these rides? It's basically going right over the president's head. And then there's a plane that was circling the entire time, small plane. It had a Trump banner behind it, but that could be a ruse. The plane wasn't stopped. There should be anything flying within 20 miles of that stage that day. So I keep going back to that. And that is such a huge story, and it's just been completely glossed over. And you even have people on some networks even questioning if Trump got shot, and they still get to keep their jobs. I mean,
listen, I could tell you during my emergency management days, we were constantly doing major events throughout the entire state of New York. All the agencies would be there. We'd be all on the same page. We would coordinate. We even did the 2012 presidential debate at Hofstra University, and Secret Service was there organizing, coordinating the whole thing, and everyone was on the same radios, right? We had this all on the same radio channels, and it raises a really big question that I want to ask you when we get back from this quick break. So everyone, hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So, Joe, we're talking about the assassination attempt on Trump, and we have to ask ourselves this question. Has the bureaucracy become that thoroughly incompetent? And the bureaucrats in these offices, have they become that thoroughly incompetent? Because when you look at all the mistakes made, you have to ask, is it intentional, or have we really dropped this low in the history of the United States that we're at the lowest level, the bottom of the barrel, that's staffing these positions, and thoroughly incompetent people are in charge of everything?
That's the thing. We don't have our best, do we? I mean, I'd love to have more CEOs running things like a CEO. I didn't think Mitt Romney was going to be a bad president. I know, right, but the guy can manage things. You got the feeling, right? Maybe you had to sacrifice on some things, but we just don't seem to have those kind of candidates. Trump was an excellent president, I think, if you look at the record before COVID, just on all objective measures. I'm not cheerleading here in any way, shape, or form, but we had peace and we had prosperity. And if he didn't have so much opposition by his own party in the beginning, remember, he had the House and the Senate, and they shot down repealing Obamacare, or they weren't giving him what he wanted on border wall construction. Then once Pelosi came in, then basically blocked him on everything, but he still got a lot done. Trump needs to be more disciplined, however. And if he does get that debate with Kamala Harris, he can't just be like, well, my rallies are my prep, so I'm just going to do it that way. No, you can't repeat the same things you're saying over and over again in rallies. They're good points, but he needs to have 15, 16 policy positions of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz at the ready. So when they say something, he's ready. It's there, and he hits back on it, doesn't call her dumb, doesn't talk about her race, doesn't talk about DEI or anything like that. Those are all
doesn't attack Republicans.
Yeah, exactly. It taxed Georgia. Like, what are you doing? I mean, it makes zero sense. It's a key swing state, and Brian Kemp happens to be a popular governor. So what? Well, what calculation are you making here, or you just don't have the discipline? So it's all of those things. If you get Apprentice Trump, I went back and watched an episode with my kid a couple of days ago, and it's just amazing how just in command, in control he is. You can see why he became so popular as a politician. Give me that Trump. Few words, strong actions. You're fired or you're hired, and that's it. And I think that's the guy who wins. But as we've seen, I don't know if he can change at this point, but he's going to have to, because this is a very tight race.
Listen, if he does debate her, he should just turn to her and say, I'm relinquishing my time to Kamala Harris. I just want to ask one question.
Yep.
Kamala, please explain the geopolitical situation that we find ourselves in, and what your intent is to resolve it and bring world stability. That would just be epic, because she'll just say gibberish. I mean, like she usually
gibberish,
does.
Yeah. Or, hey, if you're pro fracking, what's that going to do to the environment and climate change? How's she going to answer that, right? Because she has to appease the left. At the same time, she, I guess, wants to avoid like a very unpopular position for Pennsylvanians. Yeah, you're right. You just say, here's where I come down. I'm pro fracking, or I'm pro wall, or I'm against sanctuary cities, or I don't think men should compete against women in sports. Yes, you make like two, 3 sentences. You give your policy position. You have to explain it, right? Yeah. It's already there, and you say, I relinquish the rest of my time to the vice president and let her explain X, Y, Z. Yeah, that would be a masterstroke, but it won't happen.
No, well, I mean, she doesn't even have a platform on her campaign website. I mean, that's how nobody cares what she says or does. It's amazing. The media would. And when you look at it, it's always confused me with Trump, in the sense he's not a devout conservative that sticks to core conservative ideology. He is someone that you can negotiate with. Why have the Democrats and media from the beginning have been so hostile when they could actually get a lot of what they want if they just sit down and negotiate with them? Like if Trump was impeached and removed from office and Mike Pence became president, you're not negotiating with Mike Pence on conservative issues. With Trump, you can. Why have they not realized that?
Why can't they? I don't know. I know during interviews I'm supposed to have all the answers, but there's just some things that just can't be explained. What's your theory on it?
They just become so ideological. They're blinded by hatred. They all they want is power, and that's what they're consumed with. I mean, if you look at everything they've done, from censorship to calling to revoke Fox News' broadcasting license, to sitting there and keeping kids out of school for nearly 2 years, forcing people to wear masks and get vaccinated. And if they didn't, they'd get fired. But not only would they get fired, they wouldn't qualify for unemployment benefits. So we're going to crush their lives. To me, it comes down to a whole power thing. Yet I just can't figure out what they want to govern over if everything collapses. I mean, I don't want to govern over crap. I want to govern over a powerful country. And yet they're leading us in that direction. That's my thoughts.
That. Yeah. I remember CNN a couple of years ago, their media team, right? Brian Stelter, Oliver Darcy, they literally were calling cable operators and saying, how could you still carry Fox News given the danger they are to this country? I mean, can you believe that? I mean, you said the word before, it's completely accurate. That's activism. Right there. You're literally trying to pull us off the air, get thousands of people fired because you don't agree with our point of view. I shudder to think. I like my job. I get paid okay, but I really do it because I really do think that it's important to have a Fox News out there, because we have an actual news division. Like, people always think of Sean Hannity or Jesse Waters, Gutfeld, The Five, all that. But our news division, I think, is very solid. And you watch Special Report and Brett Baer. That's like the old school kind of news. Evening newscast that we would see with a Peter Jennings, for example. I think it's similar. But you picture a world without Fox or without other outlets, or without Twitter under Elon Musk. And they would have a run on information. The war on information would be completely controlled by the left, and no one would know better. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I can't believe that literally almost happened, where the cable operators thankfully said, no, we're going to keep carrying Fox. You can't tell us what to do. But what happens if that did happen? The left will be in control forever. And that's kind of my worry. If Kamala Harris and Tim Walz can win, given where they stand on everything, you tell me what Republican could ever win an election again, because I don't see it happening.
Yeah, it's definitely concerning times. And as the Democrats become more radicalized, if she wins, I think every American should be frightened. Joe, I really appreciate your time, and everyone needs to check out Progressively Worse: Why Today's Democrats Ain't Your Daddy's Donkey. We can have links up at the PAS Report website, pasreport.com. Joe, thanks for coming on.
Thanks. That was fun. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at pasreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.